the type of shoes you need to wear, type of camouflage, the times of day that you're going to hunt. What is the wind like? Is there good prevailing wind? Does the wind swirl? Are there better months in the year where the wind's more steady? All these factors start becoming important because of the proximity of getting close to the animal.
Hello and welcome to the Wild Dispatch. I'm Robin and I'm back with more skills and stories from the wild. We have a returning guest today and we are going all the way back to our first guest, which admittedly may not have been that long ago, but it feels like years to me with all the new adventures and other things that I've managed to squeeze in the past 6 months or so. But anyway, his name is Fred Hammer. He is from South Africa, and he is gracing us with his skills and stories once more. This episode, we're picking Fred's big brain about all things hunting in South Africa. Ever wondered how every single part of that process works? Well, Fred's about to serve it up on a big golden platter. Right, the entree is over. Time to get on with the main course, and this terrible analogy. On with the show.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch.
I'm excited to say we have a returning guest today. Fred Hammer is back for more action. If you haven't listened to his previous podcast, I'd definitely recommend that you pause this one and go back and listen to his stories because he's got some great ones. Lots of adventures through hunting in South Africa, bow hunting, learning how he became a ninja in the woods. So the reason why I'm having him back today is to try and extract some of that information. I want to try and learn all of the nuances of what's going on in that genius mind of his. I'm being very flattering now, but ultimately, yeah, I want to kind of start at the beginning and just go, right, I'm going to wipe the slate clean. Imagine I've never been to South Africa. Imagine I've never hunted in South Africa, and just go from there and like learn how this whole thing is going to work. So this is going to be the hunting/bow hunting Africa 101. Fred Hammer, welcome to the show.
What's up, my man?
I should say welcome back. Yeah, dude, I'm excited to have you on board again, man.
Yeah, we've. I think it's been good. We've been since our last chat. We've been quite busy
Mm-hmm.
putting the smackdown on some animals with clients. So yeah, it's been exciting, eh?
What have you been chasing? Anything specific?
Yeah. We had a group of guys. We did a bit of mix hunting, all with the bow. I think we got 3 buffalo
Wow.
and probably about 70 or 80 other trophy species. So mixture between springbuck and kudu and sable and warthogs and yeah. So it was a big one. I had a lot of fun and yeah, it was good.
I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. Did you say 70 or 80 or 17 or 18?
No, between 70 to 80 animals. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of animals. Crikey. I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah, look, it was a group of guys, group of PHs, but yeah, bounting only, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was just wicked. It was wild.
Wow. Cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I want to do today is, pick your brains about this whole process. Obviously, these guys who came and hunted with you, they've gone through the whole thing. If there was someone else out there, who's hearing stories of people having these crazy experiences hunting in the bush in Africa, I want to kind of go through like the step-by-step process so that people can have just like a top line idea about what that process involves. So I guess, starting with how it all works, like travel to airports and all that kind of stuff, like carrying weapons, be they, your bow or your rifle. How does that all work?
Okay, we're going to go into that, but I've just got a question for you, brother.
Okay.
And my question is, first of all, why do people want to come and hunt in South Africa or Africa? Sort of on your side of the world, what starts piquing that interest? And then I'll go into all of my stuff here, but that's sort of something interesting to me. How do you guys get onto the topic of Africa?
That is a very big
Quite a
question.
general one.
No, I think it's difficult, right? Like it's a difficult one to answer. For me specifically, I have been very lucky, and I'm like very appreciative of the opportunities I've had. That kind of being married to a South African meant that it was just kind of there, and I was already in South Africa, and it was only after being there for a few years that then someone was like, "Oh, do you want to come on a hunt?" So weirdly, I did it the complete opposite way to I think how most people do. So what I'm imagining is people are hunting in other countries, they're having cool experiences, and I don't know. I think there's always this mystique about going to Africa, right? The idea of going to places which are generally known as properly wild, you know? And there being all those animals that you've never seen before, never heard of before. Also, some nasty predators as well. So yeah, I think I couldn't answer that specifically for everyone, but I think that's got to be some of the drive, right?
Yeah, it's just an interesting question. It's maybe something that we should explore a bit,
Mm.
down the line on the podcast on your end. It's just nice to know what gets the guys starting. If I ask you this and I think about myself, if I think about hunting in the States, the idea of chasing elk in the bugle and the in the woods and then timber in the mountains, being there or having the desire to be there in that moment is quite exciting. I think that's sort of what um,
Hmm.
maybe visualizing yourself in the moment,
Yeah,
being there.
yeah.
But on our end, it would be hard to visualize sometimes.
No, for sure. No, I think you're exactly right with that, aren't you? It's that thing. It's the romance of the unknown. You know, it's whatever that you don't have normally. I mean, it's amazing here over in the US hunting. You know, there's like black bear and elk and all these different species of animals, but they're the things that over time become familiar, right? So then, wow, there's all this other stuff out there. I think I saw on Wikipedia that there's, well, I couldn't believe this. I wrote it down here somewhere. 72 species of antelope in Africa. I mean, I mean that just blows my mind. So, I mean, there is a very long list of animals that you can have interactions with out there.
No, absolutely. So, yeah, well, let's get into it then. Um, so, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the bow hunting side of things. It's sort of what I do like. We do some rifle hunting, but, bow hunting is slightly different and maybe not so well known. And yeah, so generally, guys who want to come and bow hunt in Africa will, reach out to an agent or an outfitter, which they have in some form or another have got in contact with, and start this process of inquiring about a bow hunting safari. And so that's quite a it is actually quite simple. There's so much choice when you start going onto the web and looking at potential outfitters and stuff. You almost get blown away. I don't know if you've had a look, but yeah, it can be overwhelming. And
Like, so when I first went to South Africa, and this was maybe 13, 14 years ago, and that wasn't even for a hunting trip. That was just traveling there to see my wife's family for the first time. I am maybe a little bit embarrassed to say, but I wasn't even sure about what the infrastructure was going to be like, right? Like, I mean, I don't consider myself an ignorant person, but you think of Africa, you think of, dust roads and I don't know. There's just like preconceptions in your mind. So, yeah, I guess like the infrastructure was surprising to me. Obviously, it's like a first world city, like almost like 95% a first world country, I should say. Like there's full highways, infrastructure, everything. It's an enormous place with big airports and everything functioning. So, but how I guess what I was going to ask you about is like how it all works. policies of bringing weapons into the country? If you're trying to, okay, I want to go hunt in South Africa, what's the process? Okay, you get your weapons on board, like with the bow, for instance. Is that complicated?
It's, I would say generally people don't like admin, but to get a rifle or a bow over is actually not very difficult.
Okay.
It depends on what airline you're flying. There's sometimes some marginal paperwork that you need to do and do beforehand, but generally the processes should be streamlined.
Okay.
They can get quite funny with arrows and broadheads and sharp objects, and you carrying your broadheads with you on the plane instead of in your bow luggage, or so there's some finer things that you must just check, and it changes from airline to airline, country to country.
Mm-hmm.
But it is very important that beforehand you do your research. So some of it is up to you to phone and get to the right people, and then on the other side you've got the outfitter agent. You've got specific people that you can actually pay a fee, and they help you with the whole process to streamline it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's enough assistance. Maybe what's more important is to have a backup plan if your bow doesn't arrive. So, yeah, you maybe need to take two bows. You maybe need to set up with a backup bow in South Africa, or you got to be open to shoot the bow that you can get your hands on when you're there, and time's ticking, and adapt. So, look, as bad as that sounds, some guys, that's all they do. But if you've got a good outfitter that you're hunting with and a professional hunter, the guy should be able to get you set up on a bow quite quickly. And yeah, far from being ideal, you should be able to get yourself set up quite quickly and start hunting. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I'd say fingers crossed. I've been, every time I've gone, and touch wood, I shouldn't say this now, but I've been lucky. Everything's been fine. I've not had any issues. It's also been very seamless from from an admin point of view. Like coming through the airport and everything has always been very simple. Like bringing a bow. Actually, I've had two bows in a case before, and it's been no problem. The only time that I've had like little hiccups occasionally is actually, I think that this is an interesting thing about South Africa, is there's slightly different rules about, and this seems counterintuitive, and obviously outfitters and everyone would help you with this, but going through, like arriving in South Africa with a bow, I've never had any problems, no questions, no issues whatsoever. They're like, great, pick up your luggage, go, have a great time. But then on the way back, for some reason, there seems to be like a legal rule about traveling. If you're flying, there needs to be an escort. Like they want you to have an escort, like take the bow because technically it's a weapon. And I don't know if that's like a little bit of, oh, it's an opportunity to add an extra charge or something, I've managed to talk my way out of it a few times. One time I was just like, didn't have time. I was like, I don't know. It's not very much money. You just pay a bit of money. Someone escorts the bag, make sure that everything is fine. And, it's probably a good thing to have peace of mind with the bag being escorted anyway. So, okay. So we've kind of covered that a bit, unless there's anything else that you think would be good.
I would just say a small tip, when you are flying, wear your most comfortable hunting boots with you,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
or have them in your backpack. Have your binoculars, have your favorite release. There's some that you fly with and never take them off, because if you land then your bags are missing. At least you've got hunting boots. We can sort you out with camo.
Yeah.
You've got your binos. Those are expensive stuff that you don't want to just be floating around the world.
That's a
Keep
great
those
point.
stuff close to you,
I always do that as well, actually. I should have
Yeah.
said that, yeah. Always just put all that expensive electronics in your hand luggage and then you'll be set. So, okay, great. So we've got to
Yeah.
the airport. How does the system work with hunting in South Africa then? Do you need a hunting license? Is that like, how does it work?
Yeah, so you need a hunting license, and it varies from province to province. So South Africa is made up of 9 provinces, and there's a national sort of regulation, and then each province has um, their own regulations too. So it's not consistent throughout, and depending on where you're hunting, there'll be some minor changes in between provinces, and yeah, it's just good to check with your outfitter on those specific um, regulations, and just make sure that you comply. So, but it's not a big thing. Different parts of Africa do handle bow hunting differently. Some places you need to buy a license. Some places you get charged extra safari fees.
Okay.
Um, some places you need to go into a registered bow hunting concession that's been registered with government. You need to have a registered bow hunting PH. Um, in South Africa, you don't need a registered bow hunting PH. You just need to be a professional hunter, whether that's rifle, bow, muzzleloader, handgun.
Okay.
You're allowed to have one PH. It's no dedicated PH legally, but obviously, I would say is that you do have a PH that is classified as a bow PH. He's a bow hunter himself. He's got experience with bows, and that goes for any type of hunting. If you're a long range shooting guy, try connect with a guy who's a long range PH fundi. That's his interest. You
Mm-hmm.
talk the same talk. He understands, sort of what needs to be done in order for you to be successful because he's done it. So hunting is it's a very sort of niche type of hunting, and yeah, being teamed up with a good bow hunting PH is
Yeah.
essential in my opinion.
That makes a lot of sense for sure. And I've definitely had really good
Yeah.
experiences when I've been hunting with proper bow hunters, like you just learn so much in that moment. So it's great. Like you'll always be able to find a PH, but you can really tell the ones who live and breathe the same stuff that you do, right? Because you're just going to have an amazing time. So, okay, this is, I guess, some quick questions. Like the whole system, it works, obviously hunting license. It doesn't work on tags, the way it does in America, where you pay for a tag and then, you either take the animal and you tag it, or you don't get an animal, but you still pay for the tag. Like it works on a kind of pay per play way in South Africa, right?
Yeah, generally that would be the sort of accepted way to do it. You have a couple of trophies that you're after. Sometimes you do buy a package, and hopefully you shoot all the animals in a package. If you don't, sometimes the outfitters will give you a credit towards your next safari, or so the guys are generally amicable with that. Here and there, you do buy a specific tag that if you don't get it, you'll lose it. And sometimes you're buying tags in specific areas, concessions, safari areas, and you only have those tags for a limited period of time. And if a client does take that, um, you might be obliged to pay for the entire thing, even though he did not get his trophy. So
Okay.
again, depends on situation, but your first sort of summation of what you said is the general in South Africa specifically, and especially with regards to plains game. Um, that's very acceptable.
Okay, cool. So when you say plains game, I have two questions. Sorry, this is a two-parter. So when you say plains game, does that mean like the general kind of antelope rather than like the very specific big five or those kinds of animals? Is that what you mean? Because I actually don't know.
Yeah, so games basically you got two groups. You call it your plains game and your big five.
Okay.
Your plains game would be sort of mostly your antelope species and smaller cats like your lynx, or we call caracal and jackal, all that type of stuff would fall from plains game and lower. And then your big five are lion, leopard, rhino, buffalo, elephant. Some people say the big seven, which includes your hippo and your crocodile. But those are sort
Oh,
of your dangerous and dangerous game animals, I would say. And then your plains game, more antelope and similar species. Yeah.
okay. Cool. And also you used an expression just a second ago on concessions. So I know in South Africa, and maybe I don't know if this is across the rest of Africa as well, but there's no public land, is there? It's not like parts of the US where you can go on public land and hunt. Like that, all land is owned by someone, and it's a case of how you access that land. So is a concession? If you can tell me what a concession is.
Yeah. So there's it is different to what you guys have in the States. South Africa, again, it differs from country to country. South Africa, all animals on private land are owned by the landowner. Um, there are areas that are owned by government and which allow some hunting, which is typical of your safari areas, further north into Africa.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so that in a nutshell, um, is what it is, and there are different rules and regulations that apply to private land and to public land. Um, and then what I wanted to mention about the plains game and the Big Five,
Yeah.
um, especially when it comes to bow hunting, some countries will allow you to shoot plains game with a bow, and some will not allow you to shoot the Big Five with a bow. Um, but in South Africa, we're lucky we can shoot the Big Five with a bow and our plains game. So if you're looking for a certain species, just make sure the country that you are trying to hunt them, it is legally to do so. And again, some countries will specify what type of bow you need to use, whether it's a compound bow, whether it's a long bow, whether it's a crossbow. Um, so make sure that the country that you go and hunt and your preferred method or bow that you want to use is an acceptable method to hunt with. Luckily, South Africa allows 4 types of bows, so that basically covers all the types of bows that guys generally want to hunt with. So, which is a bonus.
Yeah. I didn't even realize. I'm trying to think what the 4 types of bow are. But definitely a compound bow, you're set. That's probably what I would be comfortable using. I'm not quite skilled enough to use one of the others yet. So concessions, so just go back. I know I'm kind of excited by this thing, but like there's some cool areas that you can access as well, right? Like obviously there's amazing areas all over South Africa, but it's also, I don't know, at least in the stories that I've heard, I've not been lucky enough to hunt on a concession yet, but there's like a magic about like, oh, it's this specific area of. Can you tell me about like any concessions that kind of off the top of your head that you've had cool experiences with or interesting hunts there?
Yeah. So again, coming back to bow hunting, there's lots of amazing properties to hunt, and in one province in the same area, the terrain can vary so much, and so yeah, I think South Africa and the rest of Africa have incredible places to hunt. When it comes to bow hunting, there are certain areas that lends itself specifically to the type of bow hunting that you um, are into, you know, and it can be a deal breaker. So finding concessions which allow you to pursue the animal that you want in the terrain that makes it possible, to have the density and quality of animals in that area. Um, those are all important factors when choosing, safari destination and an outfitter. Um, because you could be hunting the same species on 2 different properties that are adjoining, and the one has different vegetation and terrain, and the one is completely different. And so they both hold the same species, and they're right next to each other. And the one is almost impossible to bow hunt, and the other one is a bow hunter's paradise.
Yeah.
So concessions become very, very important. And this is something where you really need to team up with the right outfit, the right PH, so that you can experience, especially when it comes to spot and stalk hunting, this becomes very, very important. So concessions are definitely key to a successful safari.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And you kind of mentioned obviously spot and stalk hunting, but maybe it might be good to just talk a bit about like the different types of, so if we're in the world of bow hunting, obviously there's different types of ways of doing that. What's the kind of the more common kind of way that people have done it in the past is with hides. Is that right?
Yeah, so basically a hide is a concealed, um, it's a concealed structure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be anything ranging from a makeshift construction of like little branches and logs that have been cut and put into shape, all the way up to like a mini house that's kind of set low. Sometimes in South Africa where they're like lowered into the ground a little bit, right? Like it's, there's kind of a structure that's like a permanent thing with little slats to shoot through. So that I know is like very popular in South Africa, isn't it? It's I guess more successful usually. Go on.
Yeah, I would say about 95% of the bunting South Africa is from hides. And generally these hides are positioned close to waterholes, to up the chances, animals, especially when it gets warmer, have to come and drink. So, it's very similar to lions waiting in ambush at a waterhole. It's a common hunting tactic. It's not, I wouldn't say what's the word I'm trying to use? I'll have to edit a little bit out there, but it's not unfair,
Yeah, it's
unethical.
not a
That's the
bad.
word I'm looking
It's not
for.
an unethical.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not an ethical, method of hunting. Some people do debate it, but you know what? In my opinion, and so then you get your hide hunting and you get your spot and stalk hunting, and some guys will classify sitting in a tree stand as something different, which technically is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But you're still being positioned close to water or on a busy game path or whatever. Um, yeah, and to be honest, there's a lot of hunters that enjoy sitting in a hide and would be more successful in a hide and will get equal enjoyment out of a hide. And I think people underestimate how difficult it is actually to sit in a hide and shoot a bunch of animals. Obviously it takes a lot of patience and you're sitting there for a long time. But it is almost like a mini stalk from getting out your chair quietly, grabbing your bow, positioning, waiting for the animal. There's a lot that's actually happening. The animals are super jittery. You're right up close and personal. It's a nice, it's a really good learning curve for someone to really see the animals up close, discuss shot placement, understand a little bit about their behavior, their social structure. So I highly recommend that guys do that, some at least some hide hunting when they start,
Hmm.
especially in Africa. Yeah, and it's seriously intense. So look, it's not. Um, I prefer to do spot and stalk, but hide hunting to me is for many hunters a very good place to start their bow hunting journey. Um,
No, it's definitely. Like, I agree, man. Like the walk and stalk is definitely something that's always been a very appealing and like romantic option to me. Should I say? It's it's one of those things where it's just so hard, it's and everybody knows this, walk and stalk hunting is super hard, and maybe that's the reason why we choose to do it, because yeah, it may not always be actually for our own good, but there's so many steps along the way that can go wrong, and when it finally does go right, the sense of achievement is so high. But also, there's the juxtaposition that you want to have success. You want to balance success with like your learning curve and your experience, and how hard it is. You got to kind of balance all that stuff up. So if you're going to go over there and you've got like a limited amount of time, or you've got a very set species that you want to go for, maybe a hide is going to be a good option to like be a thing that's going to be more, not ultimately completely reliable, but like maybe a more reliable option. But walk and stalk is definitely one of those things which I personally love, because you can be walking through the bush and you don't know what you're going to see, right? Like there could be, it's not like you're targeting one specific animal necessarily, or maybe you are, but there's a whole list of things that you could come across, and suddenly the game's on. So for me personally, I love walk and stalk as well.
yeah, look, I think in the hide, you're focusing more on shooting and shot placement and some of that social interaction and all that type of stuff, which I told about earlier. And then when you go into spotted stalk or walk and stalk, and there's a slight difference between the two, and I'll touch on that just now. But that's where you actually really hunt the animal. Shooting a kudu bull, from a concealed blind, um, and hunting one on foot is a whole nother ball game. Um, there's no barrier or concealment between yourself and his unbelievable senses. He outwits you in all senses. The only way that you beat that animal is in your mind, is to strategize a plan to catch him off guard, because he relies on those five senses all the time, and they got a sixth sense too,
Mm.
um,
Oh yeah.
which they just know something's up. So you walk, you get out the hide. It's just you and him, baby, and the game's on. And and that's where you really learn. For me, it's always interesting how that animal survives. Each animal has a different set of survival tools, um, and senses which they use to survive. Just take a quick example. The kudu has huge ears.
Hmm.
So, to try stalk up to a kudu at 20 yards is almost impossible because they have these radar ears. Whereas a smaller animal like a warthog, um, not saying they don't have good hearing, but the ears are very small. They rely more on smell, so
Okay.
um, so once you get onto foot and start stalking these animals, you'll learn which animals have good eyesight, which animals have good hearing, which animals have good smell, which animals are just physically, just moving quicker and on different terrains. And yeah, so that's an amazing journey. And as you hunt, especially with a bow, getting close to animals on foot, you really learn to understand what that animal uses to survive with, and then becomes a personal uh, you know, relationship with each one of those animals you target, and you really learn to respect them, and you adapt and you hunt them all differently because you actually intimately know what they survive on, and you got to take his weakest points and try beat him, in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, dude. Like I think for sure we should go into like in the future, like maybe another episode, we're going to go into a lot of detail about each of those species and talk about what those nuances are because that sounds fascinating to me. And I think the funny thing is you say like some of them see good, some of them smell good, but like I don't know. I've been hunting there a few years. In my experience, they all are amazing at all of their senses. Like I can't think of any of them that have not smelled or spotted or heard me at some point and then busted out of there quick. And the funny thing is, often species in South Africa or in Africa in general, they don't give you a second chance often either. I guess they've learned that through evolution. Like if they're going, they're going. They don't often stop and have another look, right? So, but it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, look, I would say there's one truth about bow hunting, and it's never easy. It is the golden rule. It's never easy. It never gets easier. It is always insanely difficult, and but I mean, that's for some people, that's the challenge. That's the chase, is to, try to be successful.
So
No matter how good you were yesterday, it makes no difference today.
that's for sure. Yeah, I've definitely been humbled, gone out the day after having a successful day of hunting, and then just been completely humbled again. That's happened many times.
I wanted to mention something just on that spot and stalk and walk and stalk. So, um, there's a slight difference. So, walk and stalk is generally what we refer to, and you'll get this on your more flat areas, where it's thick bushveld. The topography isn't really hilly, or there aren't really big mountains or stuff. So you're basically walking until you see an animal, and then you start stalking it.
Yes.
It could be quite difficult and frustrating, especially if it's the bush is monotonous and it's a big property, and you've to really find out where those animals are. I mean, there's a lot of animals, but even on a big area, a lot of animals do only occur in a small pods.
Hmm.
So you then need to really understand what type of vegetation there is, what are they eating on, identifying where those plants or trees are, and then sort of focusing your search on basically understanding, uh, the plant species and all that type of stuff. When you look at spot and stalk, and that's something that I really do enjoy, is where you're on properties where you do have a bit of elevation. And that just gives you the opportunity to spot them. You're not sort of walking mindlessly in the bush. Um, you see the animal from afar, you see what's in the surrounds, and then you start this whole stalk by spotting the animal first. And I think that's very much similar to sort of your elk hunting and that type of thing. So that's my preferred method. Um,
Yeah.
so those are the slight differences between the two.
No, it's a good point. It's definitely a good point, and I've done both a fair amount over there. And there is something very fun about well, for instance, like a place that I hunted before when I was with you, where we went up to that high point. I think you called it number 10 Downing Street because you can see the whole world from there. And like that kind of is like for me quintessential spot and stalk, because you're up in that high area, you're looking down into a valley, and it's almost like a flat map that you're looking at, and you can see, oh right, there's an animal there, there's an animal there, oh this, you have to kind of plan a route in and kind of figure everything out as you go. And that is definitely, I think there's like this super exciting element to that, right? Because yeah, basically you have to see the thing, make a plan, do it, make it happen, and either it happens or it doesn't. But at least there's the anticipation of what could be there. But then the other thing, which has been really successful for me in the past, is that walk and stalk process. But for me, it's like such an exercise in patience, and it's like heartbreaking because you're like creeping through like a bush area. And I think I move a lot slower than you. This is what I learned when we hunted together, because I don't have the experience. But you're moving so slow, peeking, staying in shadows, peeking around every corner, and waiting for that opportunity. And it might end up being that, it might end up being that one of those, or like a few times, it's like you're creeping, trying to be super stealthy, and then bam, an animal blows out and it's gone, and it's like failure. But you just have to suck it up. We're like, okay, there's more. Just keep going, and you just have to believe there are animals there. You're just going to move through, and then you may well get that chance. So it's really tough, like mentally, but it can be very rewarding as well when it goes right.
Yeah, and as I said, when you're in those areas, if you walk and stalking in those hot zones, and you've been able to identify them, it's very exciting, and you're gonna be really switched on because you only one step too far, you get bust.
Oh, for sure.
So it's this intense game of having absolute patience, absolute focus. Um, yeah, so it's and then that's what sort of saps the energy out of you out of a long day, is this heightened state of alertness as you're walking, thinking about step, not making a noise, not dragging up against a bush and getting caught, and all that type of stuff. So yeah, it's always a challenge, and you always got to be switched on, because the next opportunity could literally be the next step that you take.
That's it completely,
Yeah.
man. And I have to say that it sounds daunting, but when you have a good guide with you, a good PH who knows what they're doing, it's amazing, because you don't have to be, I mean, like, at least for me, because I'm quite new, it's very overwhelming and hard to try and remember all of those things all the time, And so it can result in frustration quite quickly, or being tired because you're like like you're really focused. But having someone there who's just that you can follow, who's making the right choices, and they're doing it instinctively, it's it's a real treat, that's for sure.
I think we should just touch on, let's just go into hunting in South Africa.
Hmm.
Just for some information, there's 9 provinces. Each province is wildly different in terrain, um, topography, species. So, when you are planning a trip, you've got to sort of do your homework and find out, do you want to shoot a kudu in Limpopo? You know, do you want to shoot kudu, in Natal? Do you want to shoot, East Cape kudu in the Eastern Cape? Do you want to hunt kudu in the Kalahari, which is sort of your northwest? So there's numerous areas, provinces where you can hunt your targeted species, but in sometimes wildly different terrains, slightly different behavioral patterns, all that type of thing. So South Africa has got different areas, like I said, 9 provinces. They're all different and offer different types of hunting, different, I'd say some different levels in difficulty. But also, again, depends on what animal you're pursuing. Um, one area might have lots of kudu, one area might not. But that area that doesn't have lots of kudu might have lots of bushbuck, where the other area doesn't have lots of bushbuck.
Okay.
So sometimes this just comes with an experience, but getting that first-hand information can sometimes really, help you achieve what you want to achieve in terms of species you want to target. So yeah, there's a lot of different provinces. They're all different and unique, and they're awesome. And it's good to know that they exist, and they all offer some really good hunting opportunities.
So it's interesting because you created a couple of questions for me, and I almost don't know which. It's like a bit of a chicken and egg moment here. What's the best thing to talk about first? Because the two things I do want to go into a bit more detail with you is about the areas and the terrain and what kind of terrain is on offer, because you kind of mentioned what it's like, but I'd love to know kind of what those areas are actually like. So I know the Eastern Cape is, in my experience, like lots of thickets, and it's, at least when I was there, is a little bit more humid. And then you're talking about other areas, is that more, there's like more desert kind of area, or there's areas which are much thicker vegetation, trees? What, what's the kind of general changes that happen in areas?
Yeah, well, I think it's different biomes.
Okay.
So, grassland, savanna, we've got valley thicket here in the Eastern Cape, you've got Karoo, so there's a whole bunch of different biomes. Some of them have, many of the biomes, some of them don't. But again, more than that, some properties might be in an area that's very open.
Okay.
Um, but then one of these properties just has amazing topography with an old dry riverbed running through a couple of hills, and it's a bow hunter's paradise. Where and 80% of the properties around it are almost impossible to bow. So when you talk about bow hunting and concessions, it becomes infinitely more technical depending on what the client's requirements are.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so that becomes super super technical. In terms of, okay, fine, at 150 yards, you're going to shoot it with a rifle. It does not matter what you sound like at 20 yards from that animal, because you don't need to get 20 yards. But now with a bow, it's maybe very rocky, very shaly. The type of shoes you need to wear, type of camouflage, the times of day that you're going to hunt. What is the wind like? Is there good prevailing wind? Does the wind swirl? Are there better months in the year where the wind's more steady? All these factors start becoming important because of the proximity of getting close to the animal,
Yes.
in trying to be successful. So,
Yeah. No,
and that
it's
is that is something that we're going to expand upon, and that is quite lengthy, but those are definitely important factors to consider. When you are planning a detailed hunting safari.
it's really interesting. You're absolutely right, because I'm asking you to generalize, and it's actually so nuanced even in those areas, because exactly to the T what you said. Like, so I've hunted in the Karoo, which is like a large area of kind of desert, semi-desert, and it is quite open there. But I have been to areas where there is a dry riverbed, and that is amazing. You just make it, and this riverbed couldn't have been much higher than me standing. I'm 6'4". It's probably 6 foot high, and you're just kind of making your way. Maybe it's 6'4", it's like 7 foot high, and you're just making your way, snaking your way through this less recessed area, and you just make your way through there, sneak along, and then things, you pop your head up every now and then, and suddenly you're right next to all kinds of animals, right? So yeah, it really does depend on the more specific details of an actual place than what is on offer, like the general biome, like you said. So that's a good point. So maybe we should move on to the species, I wonder. Like give it like a general like top line of, I mean, there's, as we said, there's like 72 species in Africa, and I'm seeing here like 21 different species in Kruger Park alone. So there's always a lot of potential to see something new or different, or like many things that you can shoot. So that's quite a nice thing. But I guess like we can't talk through every single one now, but maybe just to give an idea of like the range, I was thinking like, tell me about like what's the biggest antelope that you can get, and what's like the smallest, and what are the more popular species?
Yeah, so I think we've got 29 different species,
Oh wow.
but there's a lot of I wouldn't say subspecies, but a lot of color variations and um, that type of thing. So it becomes infinitely more than that. Um, but yeah, bottom line is there's a lot of species, and in one hunt, in one stalk, you can come across 5 different species. Now, I always say the challenge is not the animal that you have spotted that you want to hunt. It's the 4 other species or animals that you are walking into on your way there. And the nice thing about, especially South Africa is that when you see that animal walk past you, and it is a nice animal, you can literally just pick up your bow and shoot it if you can afford it. Often it's always the more expensive animal that steps out in front of you and gives you such an easy shot. Is it not?
That's always the
But
way.
yeah. So look, the most prized animal that generally most people come for is the kudu, the
Okay.
kudu bull. It's one of the larger antelope species. The largest antelope in Africa is your eland.
Okay.
Um, it's sometimes people exaggerate the size, and then you do get sort of these freaks. But generally, the big eland bulls that we've hunted are probably weighing, I would say, around the 900-pound mark and up.
Wow.
You do get them really, really big. But I would say, in that sort of at the I wouldn't say less than 700 pounds, but I would say from 700, 900 and up. They can get really, really big. Maybe up to 2,000 pounds. But yeah, it depends where you're hunting them, what food's available, genetics, and yeah. So that's a really big animal, and people are surprised how big they are until you shoot one. Um, yeah, incredible animal. Yeah. Um, yeah, some of the smaller species. I mean, if you talk about the larger species, giraffe, that's a big animal too. Quite a nice challenge, especially with a bow. Um, it's not technically a big game animal, but with a bow, you got to use a big game setup. You got to know about the shot placement and all that type of stuff. So that's quite a cool animal.
Okay.
Um, moving to your small animals that we sort of categorize as your tiny 10, you got your blue dikers. I mean, that's maybe as big as a shoebox. Um, yeah, so and then there's a whole range of species in between. You got your wildebeest, your black and blue wildebeest. Those are quite strong, difficult animals. Your waterbuck, your red hartebeest, your zebra. Those are all animals. I would say sort of 400 to 600-pound range.
Yeah.
So big-bodied animals. And then you got your smaller antelope like your impala, springbuck, mountain reedbuck.
Yep.
Those type of things, which are sort of maybe your pronghorn sized animal, and maybe up to like a smallish whitetail.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you got spiral horn antelope, which is your eland, your nyala, your bushbuck, and your kudu. That's a spiral slam. You do get other spirals in Africa, like your situtangu and bongo and that type of stuff. But yeah, so some of the animals are classified to their size, some the shape of their horns, some according to color variants within the group. Type of slam or yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's lots of different animals, and they're all special in their own right. I can promise you that.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that there's all these different, so many different types of slams that you can do. I mean, I've only been aware of like the big five and then the tiny 10. And it's funny. And the tiny 10, I think I only discovered because I shot a Steenbok and was told like, oh, you got one of the tiny 10. And I was just walk and stalk, and just saw it and was lucky enough to manage to get a shot on it. But it's interesting because those tiny animals come with a whole extra bunch of challenges as well, because they're so, at least to me, they're so flighty and small. They're small targets, they're hard. If you're going to shoot at that thing, you've got to be really sure about where you're shooting. And also then their reaction time is insane as well. They've got such quick reactions. They can turn and drop and even fully run away before your arrow gets there. So yeah, it's cool.
Well, I think, and that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. And this is what you're learning. Those animals are small. They don't occur in large groups. They're generally single or in a pair.
Mm.
They're preyed upon by all the predators. So they have to have good eyesight. They have to be paranoid. They have to have good hearing. They've got to be elusive. They've got to come out only in certain times of the day. They've got to come out in habitat where they either feel protected by being in dense bush, or they've got to be in sparse bush where they can see predators coming, just in time so they can move. They've got the quick reaction. So these are all um, physical attributes that they possess to survive. And as you hunt them, especially with a bow, um, you quickly learn what they're good at and the challenge they pose, So
Yeah.
yeah, Tiny 10 might be small, but they are, you know, they're probably in some respects the same challenge as a buffalo or even more difficult, in terms of difficult level. Obviously not as dangerous, but um,
Yeah.
I feel I would stalk a buffalo easier than I would stalk, for instance, a little duiker or a blue duiker or something small like that, or steenbuck
Yeah.
that are super sharp.
The
Yeah.
small but mighty.
Yeah, respect them all, big and small. Respect them all.
Okay, so I mean, like that's a great kind of general cover of the variety of animals there are. So many, but maybe then let's talk about if there is. Okay, so say someone has decided that they're gonna, they've booked, they're gonna go to South Africa, or they're gonna go to do a hunt in Africa, or maybe they're just thinking about it, or they're curious about it. Like, what I was wondering, like, if there's general notes about the best way to prepare. Is it like physical preparation? I don't know. Um, mental preparation, even like what gear is good gear that you actually mentioned before. I remember you saying about proximity to animals and all that kind of thing. About what footwear and whether like leafy jackets is a thing. Maybe you could talk a bit about that stuff.
Yeah, so I'll start off. There is certain things that you cannot prepare yourself for when coming to Africa. It's just your mind just gets blown. It's lots of animals, lots of species, different terrain. It's exciting, and your brain cannot comprehend that unless you've grown up with it. I don't know of many other areas in the world where we have, 30 species roaming on a single property. It's just crazy. So,
That's
yeah,
wild.
some things you'll never be able to prepare for, and even us who live and hunt here all the time, it still blows us away all the time. It's incredible. So, yeah, the things that you can prepare for, absolutely important. And I am actually shocked. I don't think I've had a bow hunter come and hunt with me that didn't have the basics. A bow properly tuned,
Hmm.
two anchor points, practiced, sufficiently beforehand. So I generally find a lot of bow hunters that come over here are not prepared. And often they, I can't generalize there, but there's certain dedicated bow hunting outfits, and those guys are generally should help you prepare before you come. Uh, sort of what bow, what poundage, what arrows, what broadheads, what's your shot distances. Those are the sort of the basic equipment things that you need to get right.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's also the training aspect. And some guys, if you're sort of doing your hide hunting, your practice needs to be maybe is probably a little bit more limited of what you need to be able to do. Understanding shot placement is important, and there's lots of books and diagrams on shot placement. And in our African species, the heart sits on the shoulder, basically. So a lot of the guys tend to sit back, to shoot back, and in that moment, you're shooting on instinct. And if your instinct is to shoot behind the shoulder, you're going to shoot behind the shoulder. You're going to wound a lot of animals in Africa, especially. And they're tough. They don't go fall over. They show you how tough they are. So when you come to spot and stalk, there is a huge amount of preparation, in my opinion. One is, when you're attempting that type of hunting, I would advise that you have sufficient experience. That you've been shooting your bow, you're dedicated, you understand your setup, um, because it is very difficult and can be very frustrating. Um, you can get close to the animals, and your pH can take you there, but you sort of need to have the BMT, the big match temperament, to pull off those shots, and then that generally comes with more experience. So yeah, there's a lot that you can do there. Prepping on what type of shoes you wear. I haven't had a guy that's come with the right shoes, the right pants, or the right top, the right kit. I've never had that. So
So tell what are
yeah,
those? What are those things then? What is the right choice?
so if you want to do spot and stalk, please soft soled shoes.
Okay.
I know that around where you guys hunt, you get these very rugged boots, and they're amazing in their own right.
Yeah.
You've got big mountains to climb, and those boots are essential. But most parts where we are, you do not need that.
Hmm.
You need a soft, jelly-like sole, that doesn't crunch. Look, there are times when we do a lot of mountain hunting and it's wet. Those shoes are no-no, because they're slippery and
Yes.
they don't always have the best grip. But majority of the time, 90% of the time, they're super adequate. If you don't get them there in the States, we'll send you a pair. They're not expensive. They're going to cost you what they're going to cost
It's like
you?
60 or $70.
Maybe 50 or $60. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd send you a pair. We'll find a client to bring them for you. Get comfortable in those. You know, Pants. I would say the States got good pants. You've got all your name brands there, and just as long as well, the two most important things. One, we've got cotton pants here, and they don't make a lot of noise either when rubbing your legs together or when up against brush. I find that the synthetic materials, which is most of what you get in the States, or a lot of it, it's so noisy.
Mm.
When they walk through bush. And obviously, when we're walking, we've got a lot of thorns, a lot of thick bush, and that noise. So when an animal hears an unnatural noise at 20 or 30 yards, she gone. so, uh, so that's important. The fact that when you're walking and the crotch of your pants is hanging and low, and when you move your thighs, they are rubbing against each other is a no-no.
Yeah.
So don't have baggy pants. Those are small things, but it makes a huge difference. So soft-soled shoes, pants as best you can that don't make noise is important, but they must also not be reflective.
Yes.
So, but generally, your premium brands, that your colors don't fade, because once the African sun hits them, it actually becomes shiny, and the animals see it, even though you see the pattern. Um, and then what we wear is leafy top.
Yeah.
Super important. It's a game changer, especially on spot and stalk, in my opinion. Learning to shoot out with gloves, super important. Animals pick up, especially sort of if you like a white male, they pick up the color of your face and the movement. Picking up your bow, looking at your rangefinder,
Yes.
moving your head in the sun. It's like a beacon. So, shooting with a face mask or face paint, keeping your hands concealed. If you can do all of those things, you've done 90% of what you need to do to get close to an animal. So that's important prep. And then, having your anchor points and learning to shoot from different angles. You will never shoot in a comfortable position when you spot and stalking. I can promise you that. And unless you've been practicing sitting on your buttocks, shooting on one leg, shooting, you've got a 5-second gap to shoot. Sometimes you've got to hold your bow back for a minute. And those are the type of scenarios you've got to practice for and build muscle memory to be successful. So, yeah. We can go into that in depth.
Oh yeah. It's also, that's such a good point, man. Like, because we've hunted together before, and I missed a shot on an animal, and it was a brief moment, and it was like, it was the position, or it was like a super hunch position, and I had to shoot through a window that couldn't have been more than 5 inches across. It was like a tiny hole in the thicket, and I remember crawling in with you, and you saying, okay, shoot that trophy. What was it that we were looking at? I can't remember what species it was now.
It was a lone blessed-buck
Yes.
ram, an absolute peach of a ram.
And that, and I remember just being a bit like, what? You want me to shoot through that hole? And it was, not much bigger than like a small, like honeydew melon size hole in this bush. And, and it was, I took the shot. I don't know, something went wrong. The arrow didn't hit the animal. So, just having a bit of preparation, being used to that kind of thing, right?
Well, look, let's go a little bit into the technicalities of that. You're coming over here with what, a 38-inch axle to axle bow?
It's big.
How long is your bow? You got long arms, brother.
It's a Matthews Atlas, which I think is actually like a 40-inch bow, something like that. It's huge.
Yeah. So, I mean, with your draw length, you're sort of forced to look at some of those types of bows. But in my opinion, that's like, it's like trying to, I don't know, it's a huge bow,
yeah.
For spot and stalk.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're in a crouch position, it's probably twice your height. You know what I'm saying? And then you also, you came with quite heavy arrows, which with your draw length should be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But when you are out 2 yards it could be the difference between hitting the animal and
Hmm.
shooting under it,
Going under
you
it.
know. But again, it can save you when an animal turns, instead of shooting him broadside, it turns quartering on to look at what's shooting at him, and you hit him in the shoulder and you break that shoulder bone, you know. So, um, those are the things you got to weigh up when you're bow hunting and getting prepared for the trip. I would say, in my opinion, your bow for spot and stalk axle to axle is too long. It's
Yeah.
too cumbersome.
Okay.
It might work fine on a hide. It's not impossible, but getting the right arrow weight. When you walk and stalking, you often don't have the exact yardage, so you've got to really weigh up arrow weight and arrow speed to compensate you, uh, for maybe minor
Yeah.
inaccuracies in judging distance
Mm.
and
Yeah.
um, but still having kinetic energy to kill the animal. So these are small technical things that um, are important to consider on every safari.
I think also when I was aiming at that animal, I was aiming at like the bottom third section. It was a quartering away shot and I was aiming quite low.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think if I'd aimed like middle of that body, which is funny, Dr. D actually, Dr. Adrian de Villiers has said, I think beforehand, just like it's very simple, just cut the animal in half and in a vertical sense, and like that's where you should be aiming. I think if I had aimed there, then I would have hit that thing in the heart probably. So, or maybe it would have been a bit low, who knows, but and maybe that was also something I did wrong. But anyway, lessons learned.
Yeah. No, yeah. Look, what the basic point that I'm making is that every bit of prep with your equipment, what you bring over, has an impact when you're hunting, and it's important to pay. It's important to do good research, or you do your homework, and a lot of it will come by spending time with your outfitter, and hopefully your outfitter is reputable and really understands bow hunting, so he can pass on these finer nuances to you,
Yeah.
which can make or break a hunt. And yeah, one cannot stress how important that is in the build up to a successful hunt.
Yeah.
And the problem is there are so many opinions. I mean, you know, I wish I could give the guys just a handful of guys to contact. It doesn't have to be me. There's lots of guys that I know that are really good, and so you get the guys that have shot lots and lots of animals, and those are the guys you should be asking.
Yeah.
Those are the guys that know, and the guys that claim to know. And in today's world, there are so many keyboard experts, and yeah, makes me want to vomit when I read some of the stuff. Uh, yeah, so
So, okay, there's actually just two small questions I have though about before we can just move on to the last section. We were talking about gear, and you were talking about having heavy arrows. Like I obviously my personal thing, I have a bit of a predicament about it's such a heavy bow, that's such a long draw bow that you end up having quite heavy arrows anyway. Like some of the lightest, I think the lightest arrow I can possibly get is like 530 grains or something like that, 550 grains. But anyway, that's a side note. The thing I was going to say is when people are going hunting, how many arrows do they need to take? Like, what's the kind of reality? Because in my experience, quite a lot of arrows get sent in the air, and you don't want to be in a situation where you're like, oh, I don't have enough arrows now.
look, in Africa, you can empty your quiver, your 5 arrow quiver, in a morning walk, and I've seen that happen. I, I've recently had a guy. I think we emptied 7 arrows at a monkey in a tree. So, so I would say 24 arrows at least. Sufficient broadheads, and it also depends sort of what you're wanting to shoot. How long your safari is, what animals are you targeting. Some guys might be targeting a big game animal and maybe some plains game, so they might have one bow with different arrows. So um,
Okay.
for instance, you might have a buffalo arrow and you might have a plains game arrow. When you do that and you're using one bow, make sure that your outside diameter of your 2 arrows are the same, so that you don't change your paper tuning or
Okay.
otherwise bring in a different bow. Those are some of the smaller things that you need to sort of think about um,
Okay. I didn't know
in
that.
terms of equipment.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So also, this is probably an obvious thing, but like having a spare release, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, look, having a spare release is important. I'm sure you'll find one. It would be a problem if you go on a solo hunt and you're sort of all there by yourself. But generally, the guy should have a release somewhere.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. I mean, Dr. D always used to tell me, um, learn to shoot without a release. It's more important that when you do realize you don't have your release and there's a kudu bull standing at 15 yards or 20 yards, that you've at least attempted to shoot your compound bow with your fingers and where to aim so you can try and make that shot. You
that's
might never have that opportunity again. So,
that's such a good
yeah,
point.
yeah. So if
Wow,
you just at least know up to 20 yards, you need to do this and it's shooting on your 40-yard pin, you can at least make that shot. It's not ideal, but, that's more important than, oh, I don't have a release, because you'll find one. And within a day, we'll be able to order one anywhere in South Africa, probably get it to you within a day or two. So, um,
yeah.
yeah, I don't foresee that being a major one. Obviously, when you're shooting your little fancy hinge triggers and all these type of things, yeah, maybe if you can't shoot a bow if you don't have that, I don't know. I shoot a pretty simple release, so there's many of those around. So,
Yeah, 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 yeah. So then
yeah.
we cover this a little bit, but I guess just an idea about like physical preparation for hunting. Like what's the nature of hunting? I know the kind of the romantic idea of hunting in America is like packing in 5-10 miles, super heavy pack, all of your gear on your back. That's kind of not the normal way of hunting in South Africa, is it? I mean, I could be wrong.
There's not many of those sort of backpack hunts offered. Generally you'll stay at a lodge and you'll come back to the lodge. You'll head out early morning out into the bushveld or the area that you're hunting, and then return at night. So you'll only take a day pack, um, and in that you might have some spare release, some extra broadheads, water, maybe a warm top. So that's sort of the type of stuff that you would pack, but you don't generally pack an animal out. You'll have some guys that'll help you carry it out if you shoot something. Yeah, so it's different in that. I would say that being physically fit, there's two aspects: just your normal fitness.
Yeah.
When you're tired and you're sweating and your adrenaline's maybe spiking up and down, and it's the end of the day and you need to put in a good shot and you need to cross 500 meters to cut that bull off before he goes into the next valley, and that's your last opportunity. Being fit makes a huge difference. It allows you to cover ground fast. It allows you to walk softer. You're more nimble.
Hmm.
And then I would say just having a strong core and being archery strong, being able to draw your bow and hold it for 2 minutes and still be able to pull off a shot, and not just let that bow slap you and you draw you pull your arrow as you're about to shoot because you're exhausted. So, you know, being physically strong, always a bonus. It's not everything. I've seen guys that don't look fit and don't look like they practice a lot, but naturally they just can pull off those difficult shots. They just have it.
They're just tough.
So, well, yeah, they just got the knack for it. But I mean, practicing is always important.
I guess it's like something that people don't think about. And what you've said is exactly what I was feeling, is what I generally try and do if I'm going to go over there and make sure that I'm in shape and I'm also strong. But it's like a funny reality of hunting in South Africa is you get so many opportunities each day. I guess normally if I'm like public land hunting in the US, you are like your number of chances go way down. It's a good day if you get a chance on an animal in a day. But when you're getting like 3, 5, 9, maybe even more opportunities to stalk animals, that's a lot of crawling around on the ground, stalking up, high
Yeah.
adrenaline, like physically demanding actions that you are not actually used to. So that's kind of a weird thing. I don't know if there's a way. I don't know what's the suggestion, but like you're probably going to be doing a lot of that high intensity action, like you said, crawling to cut something off like a few 100 meters because it's going there and you can't go up high because it's going to see you and then run away. So I guess, is there some kind of, I don't know, how do you get fit for that? But like maybe it's just crawling around on the floor and then taking some shots with a bow. What do you think?
Yeah, I think a hugely important thing to do is your 3D archery tournaments.
Yes.
Those help you prepare. And obviously, they've got these fancy scoring systems um, that they use. So when I did my 3D archery, I didn't care about a 10 or a 9 or the ring or double ring or I don't know what the for me, I used to shoot the animal with my hunting bow,
Yeah.
and it was either I've killed it or I haven't killed it.
Yes.
It was a X or a yes. Or let's say X and a zero. So I use them as real life hunting situations, and then what I then started doing is everyone's standing comfortable and they've got umbrellas to shield the wind and all of that type of nonsense. Which just it drove me insane. Sit on your butt and shoot around on your buttocks, or
Yeah.
on one knee, or in an uncomfortable position, or so use those to overcome target panic.
Hmm.
Learning how to, you know, maybe do a round and draw your bow back for 30 seconds and only on 30 seconds shoot. You know,
Yes.
you, you teach yourself to be patient. Make sure of your shot placement. So a lot of those 3D targets just, you know, the vital position of the vitals were incorrect, and you know also shoot those animals quartering away, not just fully broadside like they do,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would say that's the, I really believe in 3D archery. um, that's very, very good preparation. What I find is there's two aspects to becoming a good bow hunter. One is becoming a good archer. And when a guy says he doesn't practice, I always say he's not gonna make good shots, because being a good archer means slinging your bow, even if it's at a normal field target.
Hmm.
But shooting your bow consistently and working on your form is so important. That's the one aspect of it. So being a good archer is important. And then there's the hunting side, which is experience. Becoming a good hunter, knowing what to do in a situation, takes just experience. And we're fortunate, we get a lot of opportunities. So our learning curve as bow hunters is huge, um, in that aspect. So becoming a good bow hunter has got the two aspects: being a very good archer and
Mm.
being a very good hunter. And that makes a super bow hunter. So a lot of the guys coming our way might not have the opportunities we have learning on the hunting side, but if they're well prepared on the archery side, it's insane how much they learn from us in a 7 to 10 day hunt on the hunting side. It just changes them. And when you put those two things together, they leave, you know, a different bow hunter altogether, which is so exciting and so awesome to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Like it's yeah, it's just what you've got to do, right? Like I think at least, I mean, yeah, I know I missed that shot with you, but at least going in knowing that I practiced a lot and shoot a lot of archery, I don't get the opportunities to hunt as much, but yeah, it's definitely helped. It's definitely helped in the past. So yeah, there it is. You heard it from Mr. Hammer. What you can do to prepare best for getting out there. Is there any other thoughts or anything that you think that we haven't covered with this kind of 101 of Africa bow hunting?
Look, I think, if bow hunting in Africa hasn't been on your radar, it should be, and for some people it is, a once in a lifetime trip, or it takes time to save up for a trip. But I would really recommend and encourage you to look at a trip to Africa. Um, and obviously for me, my wish is that the guys that do plan that trip, that they will team up with the right outfitter. That they have the experience that they deserve. That's why I'm in this game, and it's my passion. Um, but I'm not the only guy in the industry. There are lots of other good guys, and you know, I just hope you get teamed up with the right guy and have an awesome experience. And I highly, highly recommend. It's on your bucket list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also cannot recommend enough myself. Like I've definitely found every time I come back from hunting over there and then I hit the ground, I feel like I'm running almost when I get to hunting even public land in the US, because then when those rare opportunities happen, it's like click, oh, I know what I'm doing now. And you can
Yeah.
optimize on them, like it just becomes more instinctive and things just go right more often, you know, and that's a great feeling. And I guess that's all we ever want, right? Like we want to feel like we're good at the thing that we're passionate about. And that's going to happen faster when you have lots of chances to learn from mistakes or actually do things right, you know, like, so.
Look, I will say what you've said is, and the cruel reality of bowhunting is that it's one of the, I know you can call it a sport and industry, but you learn the most from making mistakes. And it is so true from bowhunting. And it is painful, but becoming, going down that journey, eventually it's well and hard earned, you know. But you do learn from making a lot of mistakes, unfortunately, and it's a tough learning curve. But you know, I've learned more from making mistakes than from doing things right, bowhunting, if that makes sense.
No,
And it's so cruel, brother. It's so cruel. But anyway, that's what it is, eh?
that's
That's
why
the
we
game.
that's why we love it, right?
Yeah, look, sometimes it gets the best of you, eh? But yeah, you always go back to her. She's a beauty.
Well, thanks again, Fred. That was amazing. Thanks for sharing all of your knowledge and really helping to go through the kind of step-by-step process of how to prepare and all that stuff. That's super helpful. And I learned a bunch. I didn't think I knew everything, but that was really informative. So that's great. I think we're going to go into actually even more detail with some of these aspects in the future. I'm excited to talk about terrain, species, specific techniques with those species and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure there'll be lots of other nuggets of gold sprinkled in there too. So yeah, until next time, Fred, thank you again.
Absolute pleasure, my brother. And if there's anyone that has any questions, they should reach out to you, and any topics that they sort of want us to discuss or question that they have, feel free to reach out to the both of us, and yeah, we'll try answer what we can and help where we can.
That's a very good point as well, Fred. You're doing my job for me, which I love. There's definitely Fred's on Instagram, and I'll put a link in the show notes. So if you want to follow him and see what he's up to, or if you want to send him any messages, or myself, I can pass them on to Fred as well. So yeah, check out the show notes, and there'll be links to all kinds of fun stuff. We'll also put some pictures of relevant moments from things that we talked about in the episode. Great. Well, as I said before, thank you.
Absolutely, my brother. Appreciate your time.
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Anytime, brother. Look forward to our next one.
Right. That's another episode in the game bag and on its way to the cool room. Thanks again to Fred for another great episode. More info than you could shake a spiky stick at with this one. But you can find Fred on Instagram in 2 different places. Bowhunting Africa for his outfitting services, and his personal page is Frederick_Hammer. But I'll put both down in the show notes. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for listening, and until next time.